On behalf of the World Partnership Project, I warmly welcome you to this lecture delivered by the Creative Industries business coach, David Parrish, who kindly accepted our invitation to address the relevant topic about the minimum viable product for innovative diversification. So remember that this lecture is delivered in the framework of the exhibitions of the results of the second call winning partnership projects of Worth. Let me introduce Mr. David Parrish to you. David, as mentioned, is a creative industries business coach who helps creative entrepreneurs make their businesses and organizations even more successful. David Parrish works internationally as a speaker, trainer, business consultant, specializing in the creative, digital, and cultural sectors. David has set up and managed enterprises in the creative industry throughout his career as an entrepreneur. So I'm extremely happy to introduce David Parrish to you. And thank you, David, for accepting our warm invitation. We are very happy to have you here.
Well, thank you, Zikri, for the kind introduction. And I have to say, I'm delighted to be working with you and the Worth Partnership team. And thank you for organizing it. And I'm really looking forward to working with everybody here today who's participating in this online session. So I will make a presentation for maybe 30 minutes, and then we have a lot of time for discussions, questions, etc. So I'm going to go right through so that we have time at the end. But if there's any urgent questions or something isn't clear, you can indicate in chat. Zikri will pick that up, and we can, if necessary, I can stop. But it's probably better if we go right through to the end of my presentation, and then we can discuss everything. You can share your experience, you can disagree with me, you can ask questions, and we can all learn from each other. So I'm hoping that at that point we have a real dialogue. So let me tell you what I'm going to be talking about. As an overview, I want to talk about, of course, the minimum viable product, MVP for innovative diversification, but that will be in 4 sections. First of all, what do we mean by diversification? And I'm going to talk about Ansoff's matrix and the COVID matrix. And then we look at an idea, the feasibility filter. I'll then say something about lean diversification, and then the minimum viable product. So that will take about 30 minutes. So let's start with diversification, and what does that actually mean? Well, I'm going to share my screen so that I can give you a diagram. Now, can I, yeah. Sharing my screen. And let's see. Yeah, here we go. The overview I've mentioned. And then we come to this idea of Ansoff's matrix. Now, Igor Ansoff was an academic, a business writer, and he wrote a book about diversification. And from that, we can extract this matrix, which is now quite famous in business terms. You will learn about it at business school, and it's called the Ansoff matrix, or Ansoff's matrix, after Igor Ansoff. And he talks about how businesses can develop and diversify. And it's quite a simple matrix, but I think a very powerful tool to examine the options we have at any stage in business to develop further. So there are different dimensions. At the top, you see existing products and new products. And that can mean services as well, of course. And then on the left-hand side, existing markets and new markets. So broadly speaking, we have 4 options. Option 1 is in the green, market penetration, which means that we stay with the existing products we have and our existing markets or customers. But we sell more, we dig deeper, and we penetrate the market further. And that is an option. That is sometimes the best option. And we should recognize that. Number 2, in the blue, is the idea of product development. So we're talking now about new products or services, but staying with the same markets. So we're only changing one thing, new products, but to existing markets, existing customers. A third option is what we might call market development, there in yellow. And this is where we find new markets for our products, but we're not developing new products. The same products and services, but to new customers. And that's an option as well, number 3. And then number 4 is what Ansoff calls diversification. And he has a special meaning for this word. Diversification is when we are changing 2 things, perhaps at once. We're talking about new products and new markets. So there are 2 variables. And you might also say 2 risks. There are 2 unknowns. And so diversification in red there, and maybe red indicates danger, because we're going out of our comfort zone of existing products and services and out of the comfort zone of our known existing customers. So when we started talking about diversification during the COVID-19 crisis, and of course many businesses are diversifying, this diagram came to mind. And I looked at it and I thought, I learned about this at business school, but it needs to be updated because we're now living in a digital world and we have more options actually. So I've developed the Ansoff matrix, and we can go to this next slide, which you can see is similar. And this is what I call the COVID-19 diversification matrix. So it's very much the same as Ansoff, and you'll recognize the 4 squares, 1, 2, 3, and 4. But we also have extra options because of the digital world and online channels. So moving from number 1, we can move to product development in the way that Ansoff described, but we can also develop products as digital versions. So we might develop completely new products, or we might digitize the products and services we already have. So that gives us more options. And then when we're talking about market development, we can use online channels to find new customers. So moving from number 1 to number 3 has more than one option actually. And then if you move around the diagram and explore it, there are at least 10 different diversification strategies, different strategies for developing our business into new products or services, maybe adapted digital versions, and then maybe distributing products and services digitally, depending on what they are. And so it becomes much more complex and we have many more options. And to have options is good, but it can be quite confusing. And we can be, if we're not careful, we can be confused and trying this and that, all tangled up together. So I offer you this COVID-19 diversification matrix as a kind of map, a map that you can use to plan your journeys, your journey into diversification and business development. And it's also useful then in discussion with your colleagues so that we are talking very clearly about market development or product development rather than just talking about everything all at once, which can be sometimes confusing or unproductive. So that's something I'd like to share with you. And at this point, move on to the idea of the feasibility filter. Now, we can generate ideas, and we have lots of ideas all the time. And we have ideas in the shower or walking to work in the morning or in the shops. We can also generate ideas deliberately. And I have techniques that I use in my workshops so that we can actually think of new ideas. And to do that, we can use these different techniques and tools I have. And even in a one-day session or half a day, we can think up maybe 100 ideas for diversification. But somehow we need to filter them. We need to find which ideas we should take forward. And so I've come up with this idea of the feasibility filter. And this is actually, if I stop the screen for a moment and talk to you directly, hello again. This feasibility filter is something I wrote about in my first book, which I should mention. It's called T-Shirts and Suits, A Guide to the Business of Creativity. It's on my website. There are links to the ebook, the audiobook, and the paperback, but there is a free ebook in English, which you can download from my website free of charge. And the book has also been published in many languages in 14 countries around the world. So I talked about the feasibility filter in that book a few years ago. And now everything is coming together. The idea of diversification and COVID and this feasibility filter. And the general idea of the feasibility filter is that we can decide which are the ideas that we should pursue. We can prioritize them. And the way to do this is to put them onto like a diagram or a graph, and we mark them according to two different dimensions. One is our competitive creativity. In other words, is this something we can do in which we have competitive advantage? Is this something we can do better than our rivals? And if so, then it scores quite highly. And then the second dimension is about market suitability. In other words, can we sell this? To be simple about it or blunt, can we sell it, and can we sell it profitably? And so all these different ideas we have can be plotted onto this graph. And then we can decide which ones to pursue. And this comes from the idea of the GE matrix. The General Electric company used to be the biggest company in the world, an American manufacturing company. And they could do anything. They could make anything they wanted: cars, planes, lawnmowers, motors, bicycles, anything. And that's great, but that's also a problem. They had too many choices. And so they devised this GE matrix to decide which ones they would pursue. And they chose those where they could have maximum profits. And secondly, where they could have the biggest market share. And they devised a very similar system called the GE matrix. And I've adapted that and come up with the idea of the feasibility filter. So if I go to screen sharing again, we can look at it slightly more carefully. And that's probably easier for you to see now. So we have these 2 dimensions, and of course you can adapt this yourself and add different things in. You might talk about the award-winning potential of a product, or the ability to attract investors, or maybe social impact. So you can choose whichever dimensions you wish in order to filter all these ideas to decide which one or two we're actually going to pursue. And so on the diagram, you can see that A in the red in the left, bottom left, is an idea. It's a good idea, but it's not playing to our competitive creativity and not particularly profitable in the market. So you can see it sits down in the bottom left. The others are scattered about. And in the top right, item or idea B in green there, that's something that has huge competitive advantage and is also profitable in the market, we think. And so we would prioritize that. So this is a way of mapping out, of filtering all the different ideas we have in order to decide which ones we move forward with. So then we get to the idea of the minimum viable product. And this comes from the philosophy, which I'm sure you're aware of the lean startup. And the Lean Startup is a book written by Eric Ries, and some people say it's the Bible of Silicon Valley. It's used particularly in tech startups and especially around software and apps. And it's a philosophy of business which says that we should start lean. We shouldn't over-specify our products. And the key concepts within the Lean Startup are that we should put out a product to get some reaction, or the word they use is traction. And traction just means involvement. It means that people are using a product. Maybe they're buying it, but not necessarily, so that we can test the reaction. It's a way of market research using perhaps a prototype. The other idea around the lean startup is about pivoting, that we can change direction according to the reaction we get from the market. If something isn't working, we can change it. And ultimately, if something isn't working at all, we can drop it and, to use the term, fail fast. So if we're going to fail, if an idea is not going to work in the market, we don't get market validation, then we fail fast before we spend too much money or too much time. And then we start again with a different idea. So these are some of the general ideas around the lean startup, which you might be familiar with if you're working in startups. But the point is, a lot of these ideas can be used not only in startups, but in existing businesses that want to diversify. And so that's how we can talk about lean diversification, which is to use the principles of the lean startup, but in a business that already exists that wants to diversify. And so in the online toolkit and course, video-based course that I have about COVID-19 diversification strategies, I talk a lot about lean diversification, as well as idea generation and filtering the best ideas using the feasibility filter. And then I go on to talk more about the minimum viable product, which I will do now. So what do we mean by a minimum viable product? Well, actually, you might say it's like a prototype. We need something with which to test the market. And I'll come back out of screen share at this point so you can see me. We need to test the market with some kind of prototype. Now, we can ask people if they would buy a service or a product, but until they can see something or try something, it's very difficult to get an accurate answer. So we need to give people something to react to try. And this is where the idea of the minimum viable product comes in. Now, the other danger is that we have a great idea. Let's imagine it's an app for selling clothing, or it could be anything. An idea, you know, one idea I use as an example is that we might want to develop an app about weather forecasting. And we think this app will be particularly useful for outdoor sports enthusiasts, mountaineers and skiers. And so we become very enthusiastic, and then we spend a long time making an almost perfect product with all different specifications and features for mountaineers. But the danger then is we spend too much time and too much money, and if it isn't required, if we can't get market validation, if we cannot sell it, then we've lost a lot of money and a lot of time. So what we need to do is put out the minimum viable product, something that is not too fancy, not too detailed. It just about works, so that we can then experiment and talk about it. And the strange thing is that what we sometimes find is that we have an idea that this will be suitable for mountaineers, and then mountaineers are just not interested. But we find, surprisingly, that this free app is being downloaded and used by a different community. For example, gardeners. And we just never imagined that would be the case. It's a total surprise for us. But now we can pivot. Because we're getting reaction from gardeners, we can ask them what would they want. And we can build the app with more features that suit gardeners. And in that way, we've just pivoted. We've changed direction according to this reaction, this traction we're getting by engaging with a particular market. And traction is useful even if we're not selling anything. The fact that thousands of gardeners are downloading and using an app shows that we have some value, some interest. And then we can add more features according to that feedback we're getting, and we can indeed then start to sell it, or have two versions, you know, the free version and the pro version of an app. And so these are the principles of lean diversification and things that we can do with a minimum viable product. And I have a story for you, which is about my business, because my business is largely about traveling around the world, speaking at conferences. And I was honored to be the guest speaker at the Worth Partnership Project weekend in Valencia. So I travel a lot, but right now I can't. So my business is having to diversify, and I'm developing more online products for my own business. And these are toolkits and courses, as well as lectures and seminars, webinars, and workshops, more online stuff. And I've used the idea of the minimum viable product for my first online toolkits, because maybe I'm a perfectionist. And in the past, I didn't do this because I thought that the toolkits or video courses had to be perfect, very finely produced, excellent, high quality videos, etc. And I never did it. But using the idea of the minimum viable product is actually quite liberating. So I said to myself, David, just put something out there that is good enough in order to test the reaction. And then I will find which ones people like the best, and I can develop them further. I can upgrade them, add more materials, refine the content according to the reaction. And I found that quite liberating, in that I've used this idea of the minimum viable product myself to launch new services as prototypes, new products as prototypes. It's like the beta version of software, where you can try it. We know it's not perfect, but we're just finding out how it can be improved so that we can perfect it and then sell it at higher prices and add new things to it. So that's my own experience of diversification using the minimum viable product. So at this point, I'm going to stop my lecture so that you can come back to me with any questions, any comments. And I'd like also to draw your attention to the links that I've put in the chat with more information about this on a special page of my website that I've set up about today's event. And on that, there are also special offers for vouchers and the free passes to access the online toolkits I just talked about. So check out that page with more information and with discounts. And we're also today going to give away some free passes if you want to check out these toolkits. And if you want one, all we ask is that you email me directly. You can find the link to the email on my website, or I can just, I can share it with you. It's simply David at davidparrish.com. So you can email me if you want a free pass to my online toolkits, so that then you can give me some feedback, because I'm in the process of the minimum viable product and I want some traction and some feedback from you. So at this point, I'll take a pause. I'll stop talking. I'll take a sip of coffee, and I'm inviting you to come back to me with any questions or comments or examples you want to share with me. And we can do that through chat, or you can indicate that you want to speak, and then Zikri will allow you to make your comments or ask your questions. So over to you guys.
Okay, thank you, David. So for the participants, so feel free to ask so we can hear you, or you can post the questions in the chat box. Yeah. I have a question for you, David.
Yes.
Most of the participants here in your lectures are the second call winning partnerships. So they already benefited from the support framework provided by Worth over the last year, right? Through your own personal experience in the industry, in the creative industries, and as per your career, what would be the number one advice you would give creative entrepreneurs, as all the participants here are, that are part even of the Worth Partnership Project, or how they can make the most out of another funding instruments?
Well, I think there's so much to say, and I have some general advice for all creative entrepreneurs, and that's about creating your own business formula, which is about using your passion and your creative talents, of course, but that is not enough. As creative people, we become very excited about a new idea, a new product, or a new service. And it's great that we are enthusiastic, but pure enthusiasm is not enough to make a business. So we need to have a business formula. And by that, we need to take into account other things. And one of those is about competitive advantage. So just because you are good at something, like designing clothing or something in fashion or any of the creative industries, just because you are good doesn't mean other people are not good. And so there's lots of competition out there. And we have to find the thing at which we can excel, the thing we are really good at, and the thing we are good at in relation to competitors. So this idea of competitive advantage is an important part of a business formula. And then the second part of a business formula is about choosing the right markets. When we talk about marketing, we often think of social media, of sending out millions of posts, and we might do that, but we can also be more strategic and deliberately choose the markets that suit us, where we can make a profit, but also where our competitive advantage is valued. And so I talk a lot about marketing in my book, my marketing book. This is the other one. I'll share it with you now, which is Chase One Rabbit, Strategic Marketing for Business Success. It's available as an ebook, an audio book, and a paperback in English and French and Spanish so far. So check that out because it's part of the business formula. So a business formula is an essential part, and I'm going to put a link to more about that on the page of my website for this event. And on that same page is a link to the masterclass I gave in Valencia for the Worth Partnership Project weekend. And you can hear more about general ideas for being a creative entrepreneur. And then just briefly, in Zikri's question right then, he said, about getting more funding. And if we are looking for funding from equity investors, one of the things they will ask about is the traction you have. How much traction? And ideally, you would be able to say you've already sold a lot of products. And this gives them confidence, and this makes it more likely they will invest in your business. But traction isn't always about sales. Even if you haven't yet sold anything, if you have interest from markets because people are engaging, they're using your product even for free, or they are giving you feedback, or they're telling people about it. If there is any kind of engagement, that is regarded as traction, and that is also very attractive to investors. And then the worst thing is if you go with an idea to an investor and you haven't sold any, and you have no reaction at all from the market. So, because then it's a huge risk. We don't know if there is any interest at all. We don't know if anybody will ever buy it or even be interested in your product or service. And this is where the minimum viable product is so useful, because even with an imperfect product, then we can test the market, get some reaction, maybe adjust the product by pivoting, and then we can get more traction. And as we're doing this in relation to the market, we're building evidence and information, and market then will help us to attract funding, whether that is awards or public funding or equity investment, or even perhaps a loan from a bank. So the minimum viable product is part of the process of testing and market validation that is attractive for you as a business, of course, but is also attractive to investors. So
great.
That's my answer there.
Yeah.
You may have other questions, and I think there's some questions coming in.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for the answer, David. The participant, Isaiah Nahera, is asking, so thanks for your vision. I will keep this quote, the minimum viable product as liberating way of approaching to new creation, a kind of a neutralizer to limiting thoughts. But how do you find this thin line between minimum and poor? Some strategies to identify it?
It's a very good question. And it's a matter of judgment, I guess. Going back to my example, I think, you know, to be perfectly honest with you, I had the idea about 5 years ago to develop a video course about marketing based on my marketing book. And I even produced some videos. So I had some of the material, but my problem, and maybe this is just me, I overthought it. I thought too much about, you know, which platform would I use? Who is the market anyway? How much can I charge? Do I need to work in partnership with a video company to make fine professional videos? Do I need to do more research or writing? And I just became confused with too many thoughts. And that's why I found it liberating during the time of COVID lockdown. I just said to myself, David, just try something, experiment, put something out there which is good enough to get a reaction, making it clear that it's not absolutely perfect. So that's, for me, was quite liberating. And instead of thinking about a grand plan and a huge product, I decided a small product, maybe just 5 videos and some useful information, and see if people react. So that's is a very good example of the minimum viable product and the lean diversification mentality. Now, what's the difference between minimum and poor? Now, it's an excellent question, because I think as long as people can see what you're doing, so for example, I made the videos myself in my toolkit. It would have been better in a studio with more lighting and better backgrounds, etc. But it was good enough. I don't think it was poor. It was good enough to show and to be useful. So people can still learn from my videos, even if the lighting is not perfect. So it's not about poor quality. It's about something useful. And then if people say, you know, if lots of people are buying the toolkit and giving feedback, I can then go and improve the videos by going to a studio. So the minimum viable product has to be good enough to show what you are going to do and to indicate there is room for improvement. So it can be imperfect, and that's okay. But poor or bad, I mean, I think it's only bad if it's just not useful at all. You know, if people say, David, your advice is total rubbish, it's not relevant to me, then, you know, there's no problem, there's no future. It's not going to work. And I think when it comes to a minimum viable product, you can just give people, again, this prototype. It's not yet perfect, but it's something that indicates what you are trying to do and what the future will be. And then if it's, say, an item of clothing or a handbag, you say the handbag has extra pockets and a secret pocket at the bottom, for example, just with an idea there. And we can give people a handbag with a secret pocket at the bottom and see if they just like the idea. even if it's not yet produced properly. And if they say it's a stupid idea, we don't want it, then we stop. But if they say we like the idea, and if you give me a prototype, I can play with it, I can try it, then we're getting some interest. And if there's enough interest, we can manufacture it properly. So it's about being good enough to test the market. And that's where I think we have the dividing line between perfection and poor. So that's that question. And moving on to the next one. There's a question here from Sarah Taylor. There's a comment, I think, maybe. Thanks, David. It's been good to reflect just now on our project. I realize that your explanations of the minimum viable products concur with where we're at in our project, which is good to know. So it's not really a question, but it's a very good point, because I think a lot of the advice I give when I'm a business coach and in my workshops and in my books is to reassure people that what they're doing is okay. And I think many people are using the idea of the minimum viable product because it's common sense. It's just a good thing to do. But then when they realize that Eric Ries wrote a book called The Lean Startup, and there's this idea of the minimum viable product, it gives you reassurance that your crazy idea is not so crazy. And similarly, when I'm a business coach, people say, David, we're doing this thing, but we're not sure it's a good idea. We really don't know if we should do it. And then when I say, yeah, that's a great way to do market research, or it's there's a fancy name for it, like co-opetition, then it gives them reassurance. So my comment to you, Sarah, is that I'm glad you found some reassurance, and what I've been saying today links in with what you are doing. And I wish you, even more power and more success. So, good luck with you. Good luck to you, and thank you for the comment. Are there any more comments? Not necessarily questions, or perhaps you can share with us an example of something you've done in terms of diversification or the minimum viable product or innovation of some kind. So let's have a discussion. You can discuss by chat, tell me your stories, ask questions, make comments. And if you prefer, we can probably arrange for you to appear and to be unmuted if you want to speak.
Yes, that's correct. So in case any of the second call winning participants here in the lecture wants to present the story, their project, to receive feedback from David, so it's a good occasion to do it.
Let me ask a question. How many people have read the book, the Lean Startup, or are familiar with it in some way? Is it something you use all the time, the idea of the Lean Startup, or is it a new idea to you? Maybe you can just in chat say that you've read the book, or you know all about it, or you're familiar with it. Okay, so some people are saying they're familiar, other people that it's a new idea. And what I find interesting in business is that we can be creative, not only in the studio when we're designing new products in fashion or anything else, but we can be creative in the business office. We can take an idea from one industry and then adapt it to our own. So the lean startup methodology is very much about Silicon Valley and tech, apps and software. But we can take those ideas and apply them to what I do and what you do. And that's a kind of creativity also. I've used ideas that I've read about that are used in the banking world, in the banking industry, and then use them with hotels to analyze the competition. So we can be very creative in the methods we use to innovate, to test markets, to do marketing and speak with customers. So this is in an area where the lean startup methodology from Silicon Valley can be applied to many other businesses. And we all know right now, or certainly during lockdown, a lot of restaurants were closed, but they started to do takeaway food for the first time, deliveries. And they tried this because they were desperate. And they were using the minimum viable product methodology, even if they didn't realize that was the name for it. Because they would say, we can't provide all our menu of fancy food by takeaway, but maybe if we have 3 or 4 items, we can offer them to our existing customers and see if there is a response. And then they found that nobody wanted to buy the one meal, but they wanted something else, or they wanted desserts and not savory. And then they would follow and develop according to that reaction. So, that is an example of the minimum viable product being used in restaurants and cafes all around Europe and the world during lockdown. So it's, in some ways, it's like common sense, but it's also good to do these common sense things in a methodical and strategic way by developing our businesses, using smart business thinking. And that's my mission. That's what I'm about, is to help people like you with lots of creative talent to also use smart business thinking so that you can achieve even greater success. And, in that regard, I wish you fantastic success. Another comment's coming in, and Zikri continues to moderate, so you can tell me to shut up if I'm talking too much, Zikri, or interrupt at any time. Another comment from Sarah Taylor. I think putting things into practice is sometimes difficult when it comes to business, speaking personally as a creative, yeah. And I think now with COVID, we have to rethink things, but it's difficult when you need people. We need to be more creative to move forward. And you make a good point, Sarah, that we do have to rethink things. And I have a workshop and a book, a small book, a booklet about designing your creative business. But I've now developed a toolkit called redesigning your creative business. Because during COVID, sometimes our businesses are not working. The business model or the business formula is not working as it used to do. We therefore have to make changes. And sometimes we have to make changes quite desperately as an emergency measure to generate some income. And in a way, that is also quite liberating, and it encourages us to try new things. Even if it's because of desperation, we're trying new things that we were shy about doing before. Maybe before we were embarrassed or a bit timid or didn't want to fail. And this is part of one of the problems we have and why we sometimes don't innovate. But when we're under pressure, because the world is changing, because of the COVID crisis, then we kind of have to. And it takes away any embarrassment or any caution so that we can just try things. But the point is to try things in a low risk way. We don't spend $1 million on a new idea. We spend $10 and ask one person, or $100 or euros, and we have a minimum viable product. So this is a way to innovate without being high risk, without embarrassment, and we know to be less cautious than we sometimes are when when we're thinking about innovation, and when we are reluctant or shy about doing new things. And the toolkit I mentioned actually is a special offer on the page. So you can get it at, I think, 60% discount using a special coupon code. So check it out on my page, and you can download it and use it even today.
Okay, thank you, David. I have a last questions. I think that the minimum viable product may become a kind of iterative process. When does this process actually end, and when we should stop and we can consider we have reached a more advanced stage, perhaps a final product? What do you think? Any tip?
Yeah, again, good question. And you're right that it is an iterative process, step by step by step. I think that, and in the end, we never stop. Even if a product is very well developed, it's tested in the market, we're still going to develop it. So, on my desk here, I've got the iPhone 10. So, the iPhone perhaps at one stage was a minimum viable product, but now they keep improving it and have different models. So it never stops. And I'm sure there will be another iPhone later this year. So in a way, it's this iterative process of reacting to the market, of improving a product, never stops. But I think there is a kind of stability that arrives. And in the early stages, we're maybe changing every week. Maybe we have an idea and then we totally change it, or we drop it and start again. So this process is very fast and very crude at the beginning, where we just try something very basic. We get some reaction, so we do a little bit more. We get more reaction, which is positive, so we do a little bit more. And this is very fast and crude and low risk at the beginning. And maybe the product is changing quite a lot as we pivot. But then once we start to achieve sales and we've got some market validation, then things settle down a bit. We kind of reach a plateau and we can take a breath and start selling products. And then maybe at a later stage, after the product is more mature, we can look at incremental improvements. So I think the iterative process never stops, but there's a very different pace at the beginning. At the beginning, it's almost chaotic. It's trying this and changing that very rapidly with low risk and high speed. But then as the product matures and we've got something that does sell, we can slow down a bit and concentrate on selling instead of innovating. So I think maybe I need a diagram, but it's like fast changes, rising up and then slowing down as we hit a kind of maturity of the product. Is that helpful, or do you have another?
Yes, thank you.
Would you agree with that, or how does that link to your experience and what you see in the projects at Worth?
Yeah. So Nedas, we have another question from Nedas.
Okay.
Worth partnership winner. Nedas is asking, could you comment, please, how important is branding for minimum viable product? Maybe you have some experience to share. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I think branding is part of the minimum viable product. In other words, we don't. Well, just to recap, the minimum viable product is deliberately soft and variable. It's the opposite of saying we now have everything perfect. And because then we spend too much time developing a perfect product before we even know it can sell. And we've spent a lot of money and a lot of time. And I think the same goes for branding. If we decide in a rigid, fixed way, this is the name of the product, then that's not minimum viable product or lean startup thinking. So we have to be prepared to change the brand. So for example, again, using my business, as you know, my name is David Parrish, but my company is called T-Shirts and Suits Limited. That's named after my book, and T-Shirts and Suits means creative people and smart business thinking. So I can launch my website and call it T-Shirts and Suits Limited, but then I find nobody talks about T-Shirts and Suits. They talk about David Parrish. And I discover that the brand in reality is David Parrish. So then I change my website, and the website is David Parrish, not T-Shirts and Suits. So we are listening to customers. We are listening to the market reaction. And you might have a fancy name for a product, but everybody calls it, cool shoes or whatever. And that becomes the brand. So even the brand should be flexible and fluid, and we can test the brand with customers so that we decide the most suitable brand. And we can do A/B testing. We can have the same minimum viable product with two different names and see if people like it more with one branded name instead of another. And then we follow the market. We don't decide in a fixed way for ourselves. And this is about modesty and humility. It's about recognizing we do not know everything. We're not going to be perfect from the beginning, whether it's the product or the service or the brand. We have a prototype, we test it, we listen, and we change. And I think that applies to the brand as well as to the product or the service.
Okay, great. Thank you, David. Once again, yeah, that's very interesting, Sarah says, yeah. Very insightful. Once again, thank you for joining us today, David, and also for all the participants. As you know, this lecture is part of a course of 20 chapters, and David Parrish so kindly managed to offer some free accesses, right? David, can you please confirm how the participants can get the coupons?
Yes, well, if you go to my webpage, there are some special offers. These are discounts. You can use a discount coupon to get 80% off or 50% off, or the toolkit is also there. So those are discounts, but you still have to pay. But we've decided, myself and Zikri and his colleagues in the Worth Partnership Project, that as a gesture of goodwill to you and to the project itself, I'm prepared to give away some free passes. In other words, 100% discount coupons to access my new toolkit course. So, but for those, there's not a coupon code on my website. If you want one of those, you have to email me. So just email me and just tell me in a sentence or two why you think I should give you a free pass. Tell me something about your business, promise that you're going to look at it and give me some feedback, tell me that it's going to be useful. It's not difficult. It's not a test or a long application for EU funding. It's just a friendly email to me saying why you would like a free pass. And I think we have a limited number, but the first ones who contact me asking for a free pass will get one. And that's my gift to you today.
Okay, thank you, David. And also for all the participants, in case you want to reach out to David, so feel free to email him at david@davidparrish.com. So I post the email address here in the chat box.
Yeah, thank you. And on the page, there's also invitations to join my mailing list, to follow me on social media, to contact me about other things that I do. And I'm very interested in partnership projects. And I'm delighted to be working today with the Worth Partnership Project. But if your organization or your business is interested in some kind of webinar or workshop, then contact me directly and we can talk, because I'm working worldwide online right now.
Yeah, that's correct.
And I'm very interested in experimenting with new products, new formats, and new online stuff. So I'm very much in experimental mood, minimum viable product mode. And so please contact me if you have any ideas about how we can work together to do other things to help creative entrepreneurs all around the world to become even more successful. That's what I'm about, and I'd be delighted to talk with you about any ideas you have on how we can work together.
So great. And also David Parrish is continuously organizing follow-up sessions, right? The next one is taking place by end of June. David, if you can talk a bit more. I'm now sharing the link to register to that session free of charge, right? For all the participants who attended any of your courses.
Exactly. And an important part of my online toolkits and online courses, when you buy them or when you access them, you also have an opportunity to join a Zoom meeting to discuss it with me and with other people. It's not a private consultation. We can arrange those, but you have to pay. But I'm offering free of charge some online discussion groups for people who have used my toolkits or courses to discuss the different things. One of them is about COVID. Another one is about redesigning your business. Another one is about marketing. And I'm going to do more and more of these on particular themes. So some are themes about marketing or COVID. Some are open sessions. And all of them actually are open to anybody, even if you didn't use a toolkit or didn't attend one of my webinars. So they're all open to anybody, and you just have to register in advance. And the next open session is on Tuesday, the 30th of June. I think it's in the afternoon UK time, London time, where I am. And so you can check that out on the link. But if you sign up to my mailing list or look at my website, there will be other meetings which you're welcome to attend. And these are informal sessions where people can ask me questions and we can share experiences. You can come along just to listen, or you can come along and ask questions and talk with the other people in the online meeting. So please check those out. There are links to all these on my website, and maybe I'll see you in the future on the 30th of June at the next open online session.